Hello and welcome back to Refractions. I am Stephen Mallon, your host, and we are joined today with the amazing curator of photography from the Brooklyn Museum, Pauline Vermare. So, Pauline, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I'm very happy to be here with
And
you.
I forgot to ask you while we were in the green screen, did I butcher your last name? Is it Vermare?
It is Vermare. Thank
Oh,
you.
good.
It's perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, if we can start out just for some people that don't know your history, what is your story with photography?
So when I was a child, my father was an amateur photographer. So I grew up surrounded with negatives and cameras and him stopping on the street to take photos of bicycles and garbage cans and stuff like that. And then later in life, he gave me a camera when I was 8 or 9. And so I was brought up with photography pretty much in the sort of spirit of, he loved Cartier-Bresson, he loved street photography most particularly. And then I would have never thought that I would work in photography. But then one day when I was studying politics and international relations, I wanted to become a journalist or a diplomat at the time. I grew up in Asia. I grew up in so France, Japan, and Hong Kong, and I kind of wanted to go back. And in my school, by complete chance, I was introduced to the cultural director of Magnum Photos in Paris, Agnès Cyr, by a friend who knew that I loved photography and that, I was surrounded with books and all of that. And she literally, my friend, pushed me in the arms of Agnès Cyr and said, "You have to ask for an internship at Magnum." And so I did. I went to Agnès and I said, "You take interns," and they did, and she took me as an intern. So that was in Paris, Magnum Paris, and then Agnès took me to the Cartier-Bresson Foundation. That was gonna be established in Montparnasse in Paris by Cartier-Bresson, Martin Franck, and Agnès. And so I was very, very lucky. I mean, the timing was incredible. And I worked at the Cartier-Bresson Foundation for 7 years, and I was doing all sorts of things. I started, it was a very small team at the time, it was 3 of us. And so I was doing anything from selling postcards to helping with the production of the shows to ordering more napkins. It was a lovely sort of family-like system. And we did, Agnès Cyr had an incredible eye, and we did beautiful shows. And so then Peter Galassi would come regularly at the foundation because at the time in 2008-ish, he was working on a Cartier-Bresson show that he was going to be showing at MoMA. And there again, I was very, very fortunate that he asked me if I would help him on the show here in New York. And I said, of course I would. And so the MoMA hired me. That was in 2009. And so I moved to New York to work on the Cartier-Bresson show called The Modern Century, and to work on the catalog as well. It was incredible. It was an incredible experience. So then when the show was up and running in April 2010, there again, I was very lucky. The ICP needed someone to work with Cynthia Young on the Mexican suitcase. As you might recall, this was a show focusing on the recently found negatives. It was a bit of a miracle story. Negatives of the Spanish Civil War, so from the 1930s, that had been recovered in Mexico. Photos made by Robert Capa, Gerda Taro, and Shim in Spain. And so Cynthia Young was the curator, and I worked with her on the show and on the book. And I ended up working 7 years at ICP, and then Magnum again. And now here I am at the Brooklyn Museum.
And congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
And you're not the first curator to come out of Magnum, right? Because Sophie Wright, who's now also ex-Magnum alumni, who we
Absolutely.
also had on their show and everything. I get like, what is Magnum doing that is making good curators?
Well, I think it's the love for photography, but also the love of working with photographers. When you work at Magnum, you learn a lot from the photographers, who are essentially your boss. The directors. It's a cooperative, so you work really very closely with them. You really learn the processes of not, when you're in a museum, a lot of the process that you learn is producing the exhibition, producing the catalog. Here, you learn how they produce the work. So there's something about being in the brain of the photographer somehow. There's a discipline. I mean, I think what Cartier-Bresson and Capa and Shim at the time when they founded Magnum in 47, they really were thinkers. They really wanted to help. They really wanted photography. They saw photography as a way to help with the world. It was right after the Second World War. Everybody was in shock, and so I suppose when you work at Magnum, you do have a strong respect for photography as that type of role in society, and so maybe it helps you then in the museum, because the museums, of course, have the same. Certainly, the Brooklyn Museum is so oriented. That's the purpose. It's education, it's community, it's there's something like this. That kind of role is very strongly felt, and so I would think Magnum teaches you a lot of that, of the role of photography in our world.
Very nice. And I do want to talk about one of your other past exhibitions, because we were talking about it in our little virtual green room, is the last show at ICP's space when they were uptown was the Salgado show.
Yes.
And that was yours, right?
Well, yes, it was really his wife Leila's. She's a curator, so she curated the show, and I was the curator in-house at ICP to work with Leila, and it was a beautiful experience. That was the Genesis project, and it was maybe some of you watching us have seen the show, but it was his project on the environment and on the places in the world that have not been damaged by us humans at that stage. And so what I felt like my role was in that context, rather than the curation, which was organized mostly by Salgado and his wife, was to bring in scientists, to bring in experts in climate change, who would come and talk about the situation, what these photographs describe and what do they not describe, in that region. What are the issues that could be happening in the future? What can photography do to help think about those issues? And when you look at LA at the moment, what can we do, to not feel completely helpless in front of those catastrophic changes?
I mean, it was just, I don't have any specific, photographs in my mind, but I just remember how stunning the prints were and the layout and everything. And what is it like working, or what was it like, working with him and his wife? Are they printing everything
Oh yeah,
in
they have
Brazil and then
yeah in France. So they have their studio, Amazonas Studios in Paris,
okay.
and they produce everything there. They've been working on in that studio for a long, long time, and I was a little intimidated at first. I was wondering what is it going to be like, and what really quickly became apparent is that they were incredibly collaborative and really respectful of the environment, that is the museum and the team and everything. Very generous, very humble, and really hoping for this show to trigger something else, right? So this show was a pretext for more change and more conversations around the environment, and it really mattered to him. And that felt quite generous and quite sincere and genuine. And so I was reading about Salgado right before the show. I had never worked with him. His work can be, especially in France, there had been articles, it's big productions. The photos are very dramatic, the subject matter is very dramatic too. And so I was reading about him, just wanted to really grasp the essence of his work. And then I was reading an interview of Cartier-Bresson where he talked about Salgado. And I thought he made a very important point. And he was saying, we're dear friends. I respect him dearly. He's always been close to me, but we don't see photography in the same way. And he says, Salgado sees photography in a messianic way, that was not to be seen in a negative way, but he really wants to change the world with his photographs. He really feels like his photos are going to have an impact of that kind. And I thought, oh, that's very interesting. It is true that it's different. It's a different kind of photography. It's so big, right? I mean, when you're in front, first of all, the size of the prints, they were very impressive. The fact that he works on his photographs in post-production to dramatize them. And we talked about this at Cooper Union. He gave a beautiful lecture at the time of the show, and he wanted his photographs to carry the drama of his own youth growing on that land in Brazil. And so there's this whole personal background that comes into play as well. And so it becomes this very monumental it's something else. And I thought it was really impressive to understand how he works and how much he walks, by the way. He was saying he walks for hours on end. It's yeah, he's someone else, something else.
It's good. I mean, it's an amazing like milestone in anybody's career, I think, to work with them. So congratulations.
Thank you.
What are some other memorable exhibitions you've done? Like, what are some of your favorites?
So, well, the Mexican suitcase was very important to me because I loved and still love Kappa very much, love ICP very much, and that kind of photography, which is not far away from Salgado, but this photography that is deeply committed to the history in the making, to trying to make an impact. And the Mexican suitcase was really very moving for me. Also because this group of photographers had met in Paris in the 30s, and so there was all that history that came with it. And when we presented that show at ICP in New York, it was wonderful and very exciting. The rediscovery of those negatives, it was really something. But then when we traveled the show to France, to Arles, to the south of France, and then to Barcelona, where many of the descendants of the Republican refugees lived, right, years later, decades later. When they saw the photographs and they recognized an uncle, an aunt, a grandfather in the photographs, that was really something that I thought was very important in terms of why do you work in photography? Why do we choose that path? There's many kinds of photography, of course, but the one that I really care the most maybe for is that one that's going to really trigger something personal. Somebody's going to see that photograph and think, oh, but that's, and even if it's not literally someone from their family, to have this personal contact, something that will really speak to you and make you and move you and do something, that will change something in you. And so, yes, so Mexican suitcase. And then, I mean, I should, Elliot Erwitt was lovely to work with. At ICP, it was really a festival of, incredible photographers, one after the other. And it was very Magnum. I mean, a lot of them were Magnum photographers or past Magnum photographers. But others were not. And so another show that mattered to me very much because it was the first show that I did on my own, a lot of it, so the Mexican suitcase, Cynthia Young was the curator. And then in 2012, Brian Wallace, who was the chief curator at ICP at the time, asked me if I would show the work of a Swedish man called Christer Strömholm, who had in the late 50s taken photographs of a group of friends, Rue de Place Blanche in Paris, in the red light district, at a moment when France was still very, it was de Gaulle and it was still very conservative in 59. And this was a group of transgender, sex workers who were a bunch of friends that he had befriended. And it was called Les Amis de Place Blanche. And it was a small show too, which I loved at ICP. We had those little shows, it was like 3 or 4 shows at once. And this one was maybe 25, 30 prints and portraits of these, so women. So they were becoming women. And in fact, one of them came to the show years later, right? Because the photos were made in 59. And one of them, Gaëtane, came all the way from Paris. She had no passport, no credit card, no nothing. And we organized, in fact, with the Cartier-Bresson Foundation friends, because she lived in their neighborhood, we got her to come and to talk about her experience working with a photographer. What is it like to be photographed by this stranger, this Swedish guy who comes into your life and take photos and for years on and became quite close. And so that was also a very moving show because to talk about the relationship between the photographer and the subject, what does it mean for a photographer to suddenly focus on this group of people that he's not part of, he's not part of the community, but then he becomes one, dear friend. So that was a very special show as well.
Very nice. And Brian is now up at the Center of Photography at Woodstock, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's a grand opening this weekend on
There is.
Saturday night.
Are you coming?
Absolutely. I'm trying. I'm hoping to escape. I'm hoping to come. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, good. I hope to see you there. They had a really nice. I live upstate. I don't know if you know that, but I live up in
Wonderful.
Beacon,
Okay.
and so they put out this giant open call that was for like local artists. It was like free for all, and it was like basically they just wanted to celebrate all of the talent that was like within. If you can get your work here, if you can deliver it by hand, you're in.
Excellent.
And,
yeah. It's a wonderful. That's it's a bit like ICP. ICP is reborn so outside of the, it's all multiplying, I would say. But when I was looking at the lineup of the, the shows that are going to be opening, I felt like it was ICP all over again of when I was there, and all those little, because Brian was really good at of thinking of, well, maybe there was one major show, like one Ouija show or one, the Mexican Suitcase, and then what are the shows that are going to be different, but working well with that. And it was really exciting that those juxtapositions were really exciting. And it's the same up there.
Yeah, what I heard was that there's going to be like a gallery that is going to be pulling in some of the more, famous internationally known photographers, and then there's a gallery for the like community based about bringing the local talents and everything. And I think that's a really good balance to keep everybody connected and also informed. So you've got access, but also supporting the local talent. And
Absolutely,
yeah.
yes. And I think, the BDC, the Bronx Documentary Center, in a
Yep.
different way, but there's also this idea, and the Brooklyn Museum, to speak to where you are. I think it's very important for museums, a bit like a library in a sense, to be open to who is going to be coming in. It's not so much like this sort of the museum with this maybe more rigid structure. This is what the museum should be, right? This thing that is, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
yeah.
I think it's been, that there's a certain amount of I don't know if I want to say it's hesitation and everything, but not everyone feels comfortable necessarily walking into a museum. It's
Mhm.
sometimes intimidating
Of
based on
course, yeah.
the artwork and everything. And until I don't know what the mental switch is, but there seems to be a push now to get people to feel comfortable, coming in. And this might have just finished or, happened right before you got to the museum, but like the Brooklyn also did an open call to Brooklyn-based
Absolutely. Yeah.
artists,
The
right?
Brooklyn Artist Show, it's going to be opening, it's going to be closing soon, but that's exactly the idea. And I think it's the combination of being represented, feeling represented in the space, but also making discoveries of communities or works or subjects that you would have never come across. But that's the idea of having both, of making sure that you feel represented and welcome, and also that you're going to be mesmerized in a way.
Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure that you also have kind of like an open submission policy, right? Like there's a way to like submit proposals to the museum because
For that show, yeah. I mean, for that show, for the for the Brooklyn Artist Show, that's exactly what it was. You had an open call. It's not always like this. I mean, this was a very specific for the 200th anniversary of the museum.
okay.
Uh, but it has happened. I think it was not the first time in history that the museum was doing this, an open call. But in general, the museum is very open. The curators are open to, and myself certainly, I receive emails, regularly, or letters of photographers who would like to, propose their work for the collections or for shows. So yeah, it's a very accessible. I would say the team is quite present
It's
for the outside
fantastic.
world. Yeah.
So yeah, how does it work at an institution as big as the museum? Like, do you have like a designated photo gallery that is your responsibility, or like what's the
Not yet, but soon. There's going to be, yeah. So for now at the Brooklyn Museum, there's no photo specific place, but it's in the plans for the years to come. There will be renovations, and so there will be in the new plan on the fourth floor. There's supposed to be, and it hopefully will be a lovely, place just for photography, which is very exciting. And for now, it's blending in, which is also, and it will still be the case, but it's wonderful. I'm in fact today starting to install my first exhibition in on the fourth floor, and hopefully you'll come and see it. It's really one chapter of a bigger show celebrating the 200th anniversary. And in that chapter that I'm curating, which is about recent gifts made in honor of the 200th, there's photography, there's Robert Frank's Coney Island, there's a beautiful series by Joel Sternfeld called Our Loss, which was photographed in Prospect Park. Anyway, so there's some photography, there's Tina Barney, and then there's sculpture and neon work. There's Jenny Holzer, Julie Meritou. So it's a whole range of works given to the museum. But the beauty of it is to see the photography next to everything else, right? Everything is shown together. And I think that's also quite wonderful to not have walls between the mediums, but to have both, right? To have the ability to show photo only and to know that there's a space, right, to show the collections, maybe recent acquisitions, or a little gem of a show, and who also have photography everywhere else.
definitely nice, dude? I mean, because I am always painter in denial. Like if anyone ever tells me that my photograph looks like a painting, it's like the ultimate compliment because they think that painting is harder than being a photographer. So I do think it elevates the work to be, seeing it mixed in with everyone else, all the other mediums.
Absolutely.
Uh, so that's great. So I mean, I was kind of thinking that it was going to be like a couple of years or more before, because you've only been at the museum for like less than a year now, right?
8 months, yes, or 9,
Yes.
almost 9, yes.
So I
Oh,
mean,
but
it's
this is not. Yes, this was a show that was given to me the first day I arrived. I was invited to curate that show, so that was preceding me. In fact, the shows that are coming up are all curated by. So the next one is Consuelo Canaga, which is going to be beautiful, and I have the catalog here to show you. And so this show was curated by Drew Sawyer, my predecessor, who's now at the Whitney Museum. And that opens in March, and it's going to be really something beautiful. And I hope many people will come to see her work. And then in the fall will be Seducata, and that show will be curated by Catherine McKinley, who's an incredible curator, a guest curator. So this year, I'm working on projects that were already cooking, and I'm helping, bring them to fruition, and it's great. It's a great way for me to learn how it works in this, it's a big institution, big team, big space. And so I'm learning quite a lot.
so like your first big solo shows will probably be like second quarter 2026.
Yes, yes. And depending on renovations, because we're going to be renovating fourth and fifth floors. So depending on that also, but hopefully there will be a few pop-up things here and there. And the show on Japanese women photographers that opened, which is called I'm So Happy You're Here, that opened in Arles this past summer, should be coming to New York, but probably not the Brooklyn Museum because of the renovations, but that should be, somewhere in New York in 2026.
And what is that show? You said that it's a collection of Japanese women photographers?
Yes, absolutely. So it started with this book, the books. This is the book. This is a book published by Aperture. It came out this year, and it's a show and a book focusing on Japanese women photographers from the 50s to today. I worked on this with Leslie Martin, who is now the head of Printed Matter and who's then the creative director of Aperture, and also very interested in Japanese photography and especially women. And we both wanted to celebrate that, it's hundreds, but we focused on about 80 in the book in total. And there's also an illustrated bibliography that's beautifully done by Mark Feustel and Russ Klederman, essays by Kelly McCormick and Carrie Cushman and Mariko Takeuchi. Anyway, it's a big collective, it's a very collaborative endeavor. And I'm very excited about the French version of the book. Looks nothing like the American one, which is interesting. But so it was published simultaneously in French and English, and hopefully in Japanese next year.
Wow. And so was that the genesis coming from Aperture? Was that their concept, or where did that start?
Leslie and I came to it from different paths. So I was still working at Magnum, and I was asked by two French photography curators and conservators, Marie Robert and Luce Lebar. I was asked, as many, like hundreds of us photo historians, to contribute to their book. It was called Une histoire mondiale des femmes photographes, a world history of women photographers. And so we were all asked to send a list of the photographers we'd like to write about. Little, it was more like of an encyclopedia or something like this, little one page per photographer. And I suggested a few American photographers. I wrote about Nancy Berson and Dina Templeton. And then I also suggested a few Japanese women because, again, I grew up in Japan, and I had just been working in Tokyo on a Soul Lighter exhibition called All About Soul Lighter. So I was kind of, thinking about Japan. And so I proposed a few Japanese women. And from there, a museum in Paris, La Maison Européenne de la Photographie, asked me to do a masterclass on Japanese women photographers, which kind of pushed me to really look into a subject that I'd never really thought about. But then I realized, looking into it, that we knew very few. And it's different in France and in the US, but in France, even Ishiuchi, who's a little bit known here thanks to the show that Amanda Maddox did at the Getty, but in France, nobody knew of her. Rinko Kawauchi is the one that the Americans and the French know, but other than that, that's about it. And so it was really very exciting to work. So Leslie Martin, meanwhile, had lived in Japan in the 90s, was really hoping to do something about the 90s in Japanese women photography. There was a moment for Japanese women photographers at the time. And that project had kind of stalled for many reasons. And when she heard that, there was someone in France who's actually here, but someone who was hoping to do a book on Japanese women photographers, we all came together and worked on it. It was 4 years of work and a lot of coordination between New York, Paris, and Japan, many places in Japan, and working with many Japanese galleries and curators. And it was this was a very important project for me also personally, because as I mentioned, I grew up there and part of my family is Japanese. And so it felt like an exciting corpus to bring to light, hoping that it will then trigger other researches and books and projects around Japanese women.
That's fantastic. And you said that the first exhibition of the work that's in the book was at the Arles Photo Festival in south of France.
So that's where it premiered. And now it's opening in 2 weeks, I think, in Den Haag in the Netherlands. Then it will open in Frankfurt in Germany. And there might be another venue in Europe, and then it's coming here, hopefully. Okay. I mean, this is all, Aperture is touring the show, but that's the plan. And then down the line, we're very much hoping to organize something in Japan, of course.
Very nice. So, have you done the portfolio reviews at the festival in Arles, or what? Have you done other work with them in the past?
I did when I was, in fact, at the time the Mexican Suitcase premiered in Arles. So that was in 2010 or 2011. And that year I did the portfolio reviews, and it was wonderful. And in fact, I met many photographers who I'm still very close with now.
Nice.
Following their work, yes.
I haven't made it to that festival yet. I was at Avignon just by accident in like 2000 and ended up at the reviews. Huh. But yeah, it's on the list. But I've heard wonderful things about it, and I reached out to some of the people.
Yeah, it's a very, very impressive. It's it opens the first week of July, and so that first week is very busy with everybody congregated, and it's interesting. It's like it's a little bit like the Festival de Cannes for photography, really, when you think of it, because it's a lot of many people working in different fields, but in photography. But some are curators, some are, of course, photographers, some are collectors. It's a bit like Paris Photo, but a little different because it's not for sale, right? The work is not for sale. And then it became really something big. And then now with Luma, the Luma Foundation and the Gary building, it's becoming something even bigger.
Very nice. So getting back to Brooklyn, I mean, the Brooklyn Museum, I feel like is in that upper echelon of museums in the U.S. for the size of the collection. Like you said, the size, I mean, it's huge.
Yes.
Where, I guess, I mean, where are you seeing the work that you're interested in? Like, where are you sourcing, talent from, I guess?
Yeah, well, so many different directions. So I should say, to give you a little history of the photo collection here, that the Brooklyn Museum was one of the first institutions to collect photography in the late 19th century, which is quite interesting, I thought, when I realized that. In fact, we were one of the first institutions to teach photography, with Clarence White being one of the first and main teachers. So that was, again, late 19th century. Then we collected, in 1932, there was this incredible show that, in fact, Peter Galassi told me about, because he was looking at the archives. And it was a beautiful show called International Photographers, and it had Man Ray and Lee Miller and all the greatest photographers of those days, so 1932. And so I went into our archives to check. I thought, maybe we have some of those works in the collection, but it was most of it was lended by Julian Levy, which is also very interesting. The gallerist who had shown Cartier-Bresson for the first time in the US in 1935. So and I thought, wow, the Brooklyn Museum was really at the forefront quite early on and showing many women and international photography. It was really very impressive. So the museum started collecting early on, but then in 55, a curator quit, photo curator, and the collection was deaccessioned for a reason that nobody quite understands. Not all of it, but a lot of it. But luckily, I know, I mean, this story, maybe someone one day will make a little film about it. I think it's like, if you look at the history of photography, it's interesting. So 55, this happens. But then luckily in the 70s comes this incredible woman, Barbara Head-Milstein, who I've never met, but who I've now heard many times from Howard Greenberg and older people, and many people, maybe many photographers who've met her, that she was incredible. In fact, a woman who loved meeting photographers, always had time to meet photographers, um, famous or not, and including mostly not famous. She really wanted to meet, the people who are working with the medium. And she collected them. And so now from 500, when she arrived, she went to 1,500 prints. So she collected so much. A lot of it was gifts from photographers. Some of it was purchase gifts, so some people would, support an acquisition. But so now today, what I have, the collection that is in, and of course, Drew Sawyer collected beautifully, I think he was here for 5 years, and he made it very contemporary, and he kept that work going and looked into subjects that were dear to him. And now we have about 18,000 prints in the collection, which is a good collection. And it's a very beautiful collection because it's a very human-centered collection, I would say. A very deeply felt and very personal. You can feel the curators, and because it was not so many too, and you know who collected what, and you look at, the dates and when those prints came in. And so that's the collection. And so my duty is now to kind of, I feel, and it so happens that Barbara Milstein was a journalist by trade. She started as a journalist, and I can see that she was very interested in political photography. She's the one who brought the whole collection of Consuelo Canaga in, because so the Brooklyn Museum, that's why we are doing this show. It traveled, it was at SF MoMA, it's coming back, but we have the largest collection of Consuelo Canaga's work. And that's quite of an, I feel like it's quite indicative of the museum, who the museum has been collecting for photography. She's a woman. She's not so well known. In fact, she should be much better known. And hopefully this show will help with, knowing who she was and what she was doing in the 30s. She was a contemporary of Dorothea Lange and a friend of hers. But so that's what Barbara Milstein was doing. She was not looking, she didn't have maybe the budgets also of another institution like MoMA or the Whitney, but there was a passion there that was maybe more valuable in that sense, right? She knew exactly what she was looking for, and she was meeting the photographers. And so, there's only so much you can do when you're one person. It's not a department. It's really I'm the curator
Department
of
of
photography,
one.
and then I'm working. Yeah, I'm a one-woman band. And then there's Imani Williford, who's lovely, who's the curatorial assistant. So it's really two of us, and we are. So I try to meet as many photographers as I can, and I have now, since I arrived, met many. And I apologize if I don't answer all the emails, but I do try my best to, and if so, nudge me if I don't respond. But I am deeply interested in the work that's being made, or the work that has been done. And so, yeah, and a lot of it, a lot of the collection is Brooklyn artists, Brooklyn photographers. As we mentioned earlier, this is important also to look at also the shifts in everything. Who lives in Brooklyn, the architecture of Brooklyn. I mean, you have also very quirky subjects that are Brooklyn. So Brooklyn is one big one, but also documentary. I mean, street photography, everything is in the collections. And it's a beautiful one. You can access online. If you go on the Brooklyn Museum website, and if you look into the collections, you can browse. There's quite a lot.
So how can people get the work to you? Like,
By email. Yeah, they
email?
just send, by email. They can, that's the best way, I suppose. Or by mail. I do receive books and letters, lovely letters and little notes. I have a few here. And so, yeah, that's also good.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
And then what about acquisitions? I guess because like one of the other dreams is for a photographer to get into an institution like the museum. Like, I mean, like I said, it's been less than a year that you've been at the museum, but like, what's the process just also in your past experience for artists to be acquired? Are
Mhm.
they, I mean, as artists, should we be giving work to the museum? Should we be waiting for, a sponsor to donate it? Like, what's
I
the
think,
process?
yeah, I think the best way is always for the artist to get money for his or her art. And I think that the purchase gift is the best. So that's what my gut feeling, knowing also how difficult it is for photographers to survive with their practice. So since I've started, there have been quite a few purchase gifts, meaning that a photographer knew a collector or someone who support their work and asked them, would you support an acquisition for the for the Brooklyn Museum collection? And that's the best way for me, because then the artist gets paid. But then sometimes the artist has a print that they don't know what to do with it, because it's been, and that's happened. And this is more, but it's in storage or it's somewhere and it's beautiful work, but they don't know anyone who could buy it, but it kind of would help them too, and of course to be in the collection. And that's another situation where, of course, we'll take this print. It's beautiful, it's, if it's in Brooklyn, it's generally with Brooklyn artists. And so that's another option, because the reality is that we don't have big budgets. Certainly in photography, we don't really have budget for acquisition. So the best way is that alliance between the artists and a supporter. It doesn't have, in fact, in some instances, I was able to say, well, I think maybe that person might be able to, you know, to support this acquisition. And it was a great match, and that worked like this. It's always lengthy. These things take time from the moment that you start a conversation about, oh, wouldn't it be nice, to bring this into the collection, to when it actually happens. It takes time. And again, I've not been here for a long time, but I can see that and it's better anyway. It's good that it takes time, because you need to put thought into it, and then you have, of course, the committees, it has to be approved by everybody along the way. So it is a process, but it's best when everybody wins. And it's really something that I find quite exciting, to know that you're bringing an artist in, and it's going to be there, for generations on. People will be able to see the work in the galleries. In some show that might be surprising, like, suddenly you see, in fact, just now to see those Robert Frank prints, and that's a gift from the Robert Frank Foundation. But to see them sitting next to works that are, sculptures from another time, it's quite moving.
Definitely. You mentioned a little bit about the committees, and that actually led me into one of the other questions I have. Is like, what is your, day-to-day and, week-to-week like as the curator of a museum? Like, what's your day-to-day and week-to-week like? Like, who do you have to meet with, and like, what are the discussions?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a lot of writing labels. At the moment, it's been a lot of labels because of there's the show that's being installed now, then Consuelo Canaga. So it's a lot of writing, which is wonderful. Also writing when you do go through the process of acquisition, you have to write what is called a justification for each work. So you write a little text that accompanies the work that you're bringing into the collection. And in that text, you say, why are we bringing it in? Why is it, transformative for the collection? So this takes quite a lot of time. You want to be thoughtful. There's a lot of speaking with the colleagues. I have an incredible team. So here I am in my office. Above me are the mummies. I'm under the Egyptian wing. And so I'm working with the Egyptologists here. I'm in the wing. It's called Ekene. I'm in the Egyptian wing. But also across from me is Kimberly Gant, who is the curator for contemporary art, and Ernestine White-Mefetu, who's the curator of African art, and Joan Cummins, who's the head of Asian art. And so we have many conversations about in fact, collections, because a lot of the work, photography, sometimes it's a photograph. For instance, Sugimoto, in a collection, there was a beautiful print by Hiroshi Sugimoto. That's not in my collection. It is in my collection, but it's being used in the Asian wing, in the Japan. So all of those conversations are incredible, to know that a photograph is going to be in that context. Or the American wing was just reinstalled, the American art by Stephanie Sparry Williams, and it's this incredible reinstalled, and there's a lot of photography in. So that's also taking, some time to make sure that you are aware that your collection is here and there, and that you're going to write the proper text that goes with them. And then what else? Many meetings to talk about future planning. But it's a lot, at the moment, it's a lot about the 200th anniversary, because we're starting to celebrate, and it's going to be a whole year of celebrations. So what are we going to do to celebrate the 200th? And that means speaking with all my colleagues of public programming and education and everything online. What treasures from the collections can we highlight on this occasion? Selecting treasures from the collection, which is difficult because there are so many, and so you make a list, and then so it's a lot about sharing what is in the collections, really. What's the best way to bring it all out, and to the audiences in Brooklyn and beyond.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, it just sounds like, it's like, how do we get the art? And yeah, I don't know. Sounds kind of like
it's certainly, I feel very lucky to work in such and it's a very, it's a very community driven, very, very beautiful, spirit, this museum. It's very open. It's not, I mean, there are many tourists, but it's really not that kind of museum. It's a lot of people who are coming from not so far away, many French people, because the French love Brooklyn. But yeah, so it's a very special place like this. And so it's very interesting also what you bring to that audience, or those audiences that are not exactly necessarily the same as, would be at other museums in Manhattan. What can you make it so that your programs are special for Brooklyn?
good bagels.
We have a good hot dog. We have a new cafe with a good hot dog.
Okay. We're almost out of time. This has been fantastic. Is there anything else that you would like to share that we didn't talk about?
Not necessarily. Maybe what could we talk about? Future programs. I mean, I think the Seducata show in October is going to be extraordinary, that Catherine McKinley is putting together. And that should be also quite the event. It's focusing on, so Seducata was a Malian photographer. And this show is going to be his work, his studio work, but also linking it to fashion of the time and textile. And it's going to be quite special. So I think this is going to be, and it should travel after that. No, I just want to thank you, because you're my first, it's now I feel like after 9 months, I'm a little more, I can talk, from the museum a little more easily than just even 2 months ago. And it's special to speak with you on the day that I'm installing the first show.
Oh yeah, no, I'm so glad that the timing worked out so well. So thank you so much for everything that you shared, and congratulations both on all your past successes. And I look forward to seeing all the programming you're going to be able to do at the Brooklyn Museum.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen.
This has been really wonderful. So Pauline, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.
Yes, thank you all. Bye.
Bye.